Welcome to Close Listening. I'm Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B. The other day I was at the library and I happened across a historically significant album. And though I hadn't thought about it in advance, I thought it would be fun to listen to it and make a video about it. This album is called Tin Machine. It's by a band called Tin Machine. You can see the four guys in this band on the cover, including guitarist Reeves Gabriel, bassist Tony Fox Sales, drummer Hunt Sales, and singer or saxophonist David Bowie. Yeah, there's no way to hide that. This is a band featuring David Bowie, yet this is not how his career started. This is not Rod Stewart starting out in the Jeff Beck group or Van Morrison starting with them. No, David Bowie in 1989 has already, of course, put out, pretty much all his important albums. He's a mega star, a music legend amongst music legends. Yet he was going for a kind of relative anonymity. He just wanted to be one of the guys on a team of musicians. Now, did history take kindly to this choice? Clearly not. As you can see, this album makes it look like Tin Machine is the title of a David Bowie album, rather than, as he saw it, the name of the band that he was simply one member of. And it's interesting. There's this social construct in how music is marketed. We say there are solo artists and there are bands, but of course, solo artists almost always are collaborating with some or many other people. They might even have a permanent touring band. And bands, might sometimes have some members and some not. They might have members who do not count as part of the band, etc. And so while we generally accept the construct when it flows from band to solo artist or solo artist to supergroup, the idea of someone as charismatic and pre-established as Bowie wanting to be rebranded as a band, it doesn't really compute with us. That said, when you listen to this record, it does really sound like a band. There's largely instrumental consistency around the tracks. It's kind of a mix between sort of DIY stripped down rock with a bit of a hard rocky sound, and it's just focused around those core rock and roll instruments, guitar, bass, drums. So it truly just sounds like these four guys jamming together. I'd say the challenge is that Bowie has such a distinct voice, and while maybe the ambition with this one was to go back to his sort of glam rock days, his grittier side, when he was recording songs like Suffragette City, the weird thing is that as Bowie's voice aged and perhaps it was damaged by some of the substance abuse he did in younger years, in a way it got beautiful, more silky. It's this nice, elegant baritone, and it doesn't quite fit with this jammy DIY kind of hard rock sound, unlike the sort of powerful, screechy voice he had when he was younger. So, in short, I don't love this album, but it's an interesting historical document. And I love the ambition Bowie had to suppress his ego and, just enjoy music for his own sake, to step out of the starlight. Because broadly speaking, that's the trajectory of David Bowie's career. He shot to fame as this larger than life guy who portrayed these ridiculous characters, Ziggy Stardust, Aladdin Sane, Halloween Jack, the Thin White Duke. And then he comes out with the Low album where he's just himself and lots of the music is instrumental. He's trying to get his ego under control. And throughout the long rest of his career, he found other ways to do that, including trying to just be a guy in the band. And, it's a shame that that wasn't more accepted, that Tin Machine didn't get to make even better music. That said, there's some interesting stuff on here. I'm assuming Bowie is the primary lyricist on this, even though all the band members are credited as writing most of these songs. So on lyrics alone, this is a great poetic record. I just don't love it musically. So let's talk about it track by track. So track number one is called Heaven's in Here. Pretty standard blues song with some lyrics about misplaced romantic optimism. Track two is the title track, Tin Machine. It's kind of a protest song. You sense that Bowie and his band are not happy with 9 years of conservative rule in Britain and with environmental destruction. But it's also just sort of an attack on, I guess, a soulless corporate culture and the kind of art and music it produces. Musically, it mixes a heavy beat with some fast moving light guitar riffs, giving it a techie feel that's sort of high tech, but also sort of low tech. I guess you picture a rickety, vintage looking time machine escaping this conservative political moment. Track number 3 sounds a bit more classically Bowie. It's called Prisoner of Love. It's a very dramatic song with some very cool backup vocals, and it's about being disillusioned with a once alluring love. And the metaphors in here are so powerful and apocalyptic, one wonders if there's some hidden meaning here besides falling out of love with someone. Track number 4 is called Crack City. This is a very angry tirade against drugs and those who glorify them, at least if you look at the lyrics. Otherwise, it just sounds like low key, angry, punkish kind of music with a kind of Joan Jett, I love rock and roll sound to it. Bowie's someone who had a hard time with cocaine addiction early in his life, so it's understandable, I guess, he would be angry at that culture. Track number 5 is called I Can't Read. This is a lyric that fuses cynicism with lack of concentration. What do I mean by this? Well, one verse goes, when you see a famous smile, no matter where you run your mile, to be right in the photograph. Andy, where's my 15 minutes? The beginning of this lyric seems to be a critique of the concept of celebrity. It seems like he's complaining about the idea of fame, but then he loses his focus and he's like, why don't I get to be famous? Why don't I get my 15 minutes? It's an interesting, chaotic, distracted lyric. And when Bowie sings the chorus, his voice takes on a slightly unusual tone. He kind of sounds like the confused, relatively gentle henchman of a villain type of character. Track number 6 is called Under the God. There are bits of reflection on some of Bowie's older songs in here. So it revisits the sort of rock star Nazi imagery of the Thin White Duke era, and arguably there's a revisiting of Heroes because there seems to be a reference to the Berlin Wall, though this would have been written and recorded slightly before the wall fell. So I don't know if people were anticipating that at the time. And yeah, once again, we have a fairly political message on this one. It seems what he's saying is that with the Cold War coming to an end, he fears the new clash will be between sort of the milquetoast neoliberal establishment and the Nazi far right. He worries about that demographic experiencing a resurgence. Track number 7 is comparatively light. It's called Amazing, a loving, seemingly optimistic song, though perhaps it's the kind of forced optimism we heard on Bowie's famous song Heroes, wanting to be full of this rich hope that maybe the singer doesn't quite buy. And you hear that in both the music and the lyrics with some artfully placed minor chords that put a slightly mysterious inflection on what otherwise seems like a happy song. Track number 8 is a cover of John Lennon's Working Class Hero. And much like a lot of the stuff on here with John Lennon's original song, I love the lyrics on this one, even though the song goes on for quite a while and can be a bit boring. This is a tin machined up version, so a bit more hard rock. And yeah, it feels like a good choice on what is a political album. Young David Bowie wasn't necessarily as left wing as some of his other counterculture music icons. I think he was very influenced by 1984 and afraid of the authoritarian potential of socialism. But I think with this album, he's really making an effort to make clear that whatever his critiques are of the authoritarian left, he's very happy to make an anti-capitalist statement and argue, kind of like in the manufacturing consent way, that capitalism can also be authoritarian, even if that authoritarianism isn't manifested in single dictators, but rather through a sort of broad culture of compliance and the overwhelming power of the market. Track number 9 is called Bus Stop. This is another song like Heaven's in Here and Under the God that brings in religious references while rejecting religion. This one is the most directly philosophical about religion, saying maybe there's something valuable in people praying to something, having some kind of faith, even while it's ridiculing what they actually have the faith in. Track number 10 is Pretty Thing. This feels like the most overt return to earlier Bowie stuff, kind of glammy, loud, crude rock and roll. Track number 11 is called Video Crime. This one seems to be saying that we watch so much on TV, so much is sort of sold to us as a product that even as we're superficially aware of what's going on in the world, we're emotionally removed from it. Now, track 12 and 13 only exist on the CD and cassette, not on the record, but track number 12 here is called Run, and it mixes the romantic pessimism of songs like Prisoner of Love with the sort of pessimism about the greater world of the political songs elsewhere on the album. The opening line of the song talks about being a sailor, and this one broadly has a sort of lost in a storm at sea sound to it, with the crescendo and decrescendo of its sound dynamics, as well as a vocal that feels slightly overpowered by the music, but not too much. Track number 13 is called Sacrifice Yourself. This one brings in yet another God metaphor about being in a relationship with someone who makes you happy and comparing them to a God, the sense that you see them as all powerful and controlling your life, even when they don't. There's also a line in there about the only game in town, so possibly a dig at Margaret Thatcher and her famous line, "There are no alternatives," though maybe I'm stretching there. And then this album, regardless of whether you have the cassette, CD, or vinyl version, ends with a song called Baby Can Dance. And I kind of view it as the opposite of Sacrifice Yourself. Whereas Sacrifice Yourself warns of the dangers of letting other people have too much influence over you, this one's almost saying, if you have too much inner monologue, you're going to be cynical. You're going to be cynical about your lack of connections to others, the hopelessness of changing the world. So the best path to happiness is maybe just watching the success of others because you are not privy to their inner monologue. You can look at others and naively think they've got it going on. They're happy. And so it sort of uses the imagery of a baby, achieving their milestones, learning to walk, learning to dance, etc., to create that kind of vibe. So overall, Tin Machine is a very interesting lyrical project. It's kind of raw, unappealing to me musically, but it's not unlistenable. It doesn't have the screechy vocals of the hardest kind of hard rock. It just doesn't have enough warmth and pleasantness to its musical delivery. But love the lyrics and admire the idea of this being a band, and wish the CD did not market it as Tin Machine by David Bowie, but actually called it Tin Machine by Tin Machine. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.